Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. And growing up, two of my least favorite foods were hamburgers and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Now they're two of my favorite things. Give me a burger with some peanut butter on it, and you just gained yourself a new friend. Okay, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, Indianapolis wedding photographer, and I'm excited to be here today because my job as a wedding photographer doesn't, I get asked sometimes from couples to shoot maternity photos or newborn photos, and sometimes I do them. It really depends on the couple and how well we fit together for their wedding, but in general, I don't advertise for these things. And today, it's just because I'm not good at them, right? And today I'm chatting with Alison Winterroth, a newborn photographer who just shares it all and got me really excited for newborn and maternity photos. So if you shoot two of those things, get excited for this interview, and if you don't, trust me when I say that you're going to learn something new. So again, this has been quite a week for me. Several things happened. First of all, yesterday we got 8 inches of snow, which is actually pretty late for this time of year for Indianapolis. I think I saw in the news that usually that the average for this time of year, we should have 10.5 inches of snow. And I'm not complaining that we weren't getting any snow, but there was something missing from the winter experience since moving here to Indiana. You just kind of get used to the snow for this time of year, and it was missing. And yesterday it all came, all of it. So we got 8 inches of snow yesterday. We went out with the kids and we played for quite a while. It was that bad snow, if you know anything about snow, which I don't, but I know that there's different kinds of snow, and one you can make a snowman with, and the other one you can't. And this was definitely the kind of snow that you can't make a snowman with. So we went outside and we threw around some snow, and we had a good time. So it was fun family time to do that and play in the snow. But now I'm done with it. So if it just all wants to melt away, I would be more than happy about that. So that was definitely the high note of the week was yesterday, playing in the snow with the family. But the low point of the week is that this week I actually lost 2 wedding bookings. And I wanted to talk about this. This isn't usually something that I, hey, let's share this information. And not that I'm scared to share it, but I learned a valuable lesson from this. So I lost 2 wedding bookings this week, and one of them was because they thought mirrorless cameras were lower quality, they produce lower quality than traditional DSLRs, which is wrong. But 2. I lost because of price. And this is something that you are going to have to go through if you are a photographer of any kind who charges any sort of money, is that no matter the skill level of your photography, no matter the quality of your photography, there will always be people who don't, there's going to be some gap. Right? There's always going to be some people where there's going to be a gap in the price. You're going to charge what you charge, and they are always going to think it is incredibly expensive. And it doesn't even matter if you've booked in my case hundreds of weddings that the couples were more than happy to pay that price. There will always be somebody who will think that it's too expensive. And what was really hard about this one is that we met over coffee, and their wedding sounded wonderful. The couple was a blast to be around. I knew right away. I was like, this is a great couple. They're going to be so much fun to be around on their wedding day. Their wedding day is going to be a blast. They're making it really personal for themselves. This is totally my kind of wedding. This is my kind of couple. And I got this in the bag. We left super high note. They were super excited. really appreciated all the help that I gave. I gave recommendations on a videographer and DJ as well. They really appreciated it, and I had some information in the form of blog posts that they said that they found extremely helpful for their wedding. So I guess I just assumed that I had it in the bag by the end of our meeting, and there was no talk of price being an issue, right? There was no inclination that it was more than that they wanted to spend. I had sent them my pricing sheet way before we actually met, so they knew what my prices were, and they still decided to meet. Didn't seem like a problem. And what was hard here was that, obviously after we met, they sent an email saying, hey, we really enjoyed spending time with you, but it came down to you and one other photographer, and we ultimately decided to go with the other photographer just because of the price. And that was a hard pill to swallow. It was a really, really hard pill to swallow, mainly first because I really enjoyed the couple. I thought that we had a great time together, and I knew that their wedding was going to be great, and I really, really wanted that wedding for those two reasons, right? Because I want to have fun at my job, right? You show up, you meet a couple, and they're a blast to be around. You naturally want that. You want that. And two, because the objection didn't come up until after the meeting, after I had sent the emails, after the meeting. And that's what's hard because, if I was there at the time, right, we could have talked about it. I could perhaps explain more why the value is there. I could explain, I could even make some changes, right? So sometimes a couple want, they don't really want the album, but they really want engagement photos. I'm more than happy to swap those two things out if that's what they want, and nothing like that came up for me to solve for them. So that was really hard. That was really hard to deal with. And that's something that you are going to have to deal with, right? As a photographer, like I said, who does charge money. And I had to stick to my guns though, because, and it wasn't an ego thing. It wasn't like, oh, well, you guys don't value photography, so screw off. It was nothing like that. There was none of that. But I had to stick to my guns. I decided not to give them a discount, even though that was my first inclination. It was like, oh, if I knock off a few $100, then I bet I could book this wedding. But I had to stick to my guns. And again, it wasn't about ego. It was because I know my price. And I know that there are couples more than willing to pay for it. Couples who are happy to pay for it because I properly communicated the value and it fits for them, right? And I know that price is competitive and profitable for me. And by lowering my price, all that I would be doing is just taking money out of my family's pocket, right? And that is something that I'm just not willing to do. So I had a rough day. Like I threw myself like an 8-hour pity party, essentially, and then I just got over it. I just had to get back to work and do what I do. So that was tough. That was tough this week. And I just want you to know that if you know your pricing, if you know that it works, if you know that it's what you need to be profitable, you can stick to your guns. And luckily, this episode could not have come at a better time to remind myself of that, which you are going to hear in this episode. It's a lesson that you're going to take away and that you're really going to appreciate. So today I am interviewing Alison Winterroth, who is a newborn photographer in Tampa, Florida, and we cover so much in this episode. Like I said, even if you're not a newborn or maternity photographer, you are going to get a lot of great information out of this interview. And as always, I cut a section of this podcast out just for premium members, and it's information that is more geared towards those who are either trying to start a business or make money with their photography, right? So the Beginner Photography Podcast is free. You get all the great information about theory, why these photographers are doing what they're doing, But premium members get to hear more of the business side of things. And today, premium members are going to hear how to attract new newborn clients when the opportunity to photograph them is so short. That is really important right there, right? You're going to learn how to start a newborn photography business. You're going to learn how to know when is the right time to open up a studio. That is a big one that I still, wonder about today. When do you know is the right time to open up a studio if that's what you want to do? You're going to learn how to keep your business. You're going to learn how to keep business coming in even after you have opened up that studio, so that it doesn't dry up and then you have to close down. And you're also going to hear Alison's best tips for editing newborn skin in photos, which is something that I struggle with and I see a lot of new photographers struggling with as well. So if you want to become a premium member and hear all of those great tips and this whole interview and whole other interviews, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the link to join the premium membership button. It's at the top and you can learn more. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's interview with Alison Winterroth. Today's guest is Alison Winterroth, a Tampa, Florida-based self-proclaimed baby whisperer. She's a newborn, maternity, and family photographer who loves to photograph the newest and tiniest humans to help preserve the hectic time of life that having a child is. Today, I'm super excited to talk to her about getting started working with newborns. Alison, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Raymond. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Like I had just told you right before we started recording, there's a lot of people in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group who I myself am a wedding photographer, so I feel like a lot of times I ask questions that are framed around wedding photography, and a lot of times I get feedback from the group saying like, hey, this was a great interview, but maybe you could mention these things, or maybe you could bring on some more of these people. And as a newborn and maternity photographer, I am so excited to have you on today. You're very accomplished. Just looking at your website, looking at your Instagram, looking at all of your reviews online, it's clear that you know what it is that you're doing. But before we get into all the meat and the potatoes of this interview, I always love to start with the beginning look of my guests, and I want to know how you got started in photography in the first place.
So I have kind of a long story and kind of a different story. So I started my business in 2012. However, I was taking photographs. I used to make jewelry. And so the way that I learned photography was I was taking product photos of my jewelry. And so I was started on Etsy, like when Etsy was just this little tiny nothing and nobody knew about it. And then eventually I had children and I fell in love with photographing their faces and their reactions and just how an amazing time of life that can be. The way that I really started my business, so I transferred my skills over to photographing my children and really fell in love with that. But in 2011, my husband changed jobs and absolutely despised every moment of his new job. And he would go to work before the children woke up, and he would go to come back before, after they had already gone to bed. And it was like, it was just grueling and he was miserable. And so we just looked at each other one day, and I was running a different business that we own. And he just said, I can't do this anymore. I have to do something different. And so I said, well, I've always wanted to start a photography business. And so he took over the other business and I started my portrait business. But I knew from the very beginning that it had to succeed because we had to feed our family. And so it was never a side business or a joke. It was always really serious. Not serious, but, just it was...
with the intention of making an income. Yeah.
Yep. And so I went from 0 to 60. It was like, I knew the photography end, but I didn't know anything about, starting a website and doing things online. And I just had to hit the ground running and figure it out. So that's how I got started. And pretty quickly, I knew that I wanted to specialize in newborn and maternity. I just really loved that phase of life and really young families. It just speaks to me.
Was it because you had new children at that point that you felt compelled to photograph them?
That probably is a big part of it. However, now my children are older and I still really love that young stage in life. I have an 8 and a 6-year-old, which isn't that old, but they're out of that really cute saying silly things. Yeah. But I still really love that newborn and maternity age. I haven't grown out of it yet. So maybe when my kids are seniors, I'll get into senior photography or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, follow the market for sure.
Yeah.
I want to know though, when you first got started, shooting products for your jewelry-based business, was there anything? I want to know what the hardest part about the photography side of it was for you to learn or understand.
So I think back when I first got started, there wasn't so much online. So you couldn't just, you couldn't just go onto YouTube and, I can really remember the day when I figured out what the exposure triangle kind of meant. And I didn't have to shoot everything at 1.8. Like if I, stop down a little bit that, to 2.8 or 3.5, then I would actually get everything in focus, which was just totally new. Or I wouldn't have 50 out of focus images for one really sharp image. So I think just not having a lot of questions and not really having a good resource to find those answers out. And now it's there's just so much out there. It's amazing, how to get started like that. But yeah, I think just really understanding aperture and exposure and how those things connect with, making a really sharp, good image and when to use them, selectively.
Right. Do you remember how it was that you came to understand the exposure triangle? You said that, there wasn't much internet searching going on.
Yeah.
Were you using a course or a book or anything in particular?
No, I had my camera out. I can literally remember I had my dining room table and I was taking pictures of this ring. And I really loved the setup and I had done it a couple times, and every time just the images were not sharp, or there were a lot of out of focus ones that I just wasn't getting. It was, misfocusing. And so I was like, okay, I've got to figure this out. So I just sat down at my table and I just would take a picture, write down my settings, and then do that several times, and then go take that card, go put it on my computer and look and see, okay, this doesn't work. This setting doesn't work. 1.8 isn't going to work. And, just then going back and trying the next settings until I really figured out, and I just felt very comfortable. Okay, this is what I need to do to make a good in focus and sharp image. And so it was just time over and over and over again. So it wasn't really a book or, anything in particular. It was just practice.
Yeah, practice.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that gets lost a lot of times, honestly, when you talk to photographers, new photographers. There's this desire that it just if I watch this one course or read this one quote or something, I'll totally understand photography. And it's, I'm glad to know that I wasn't the only one who struggled trying to, pick up these things. And if anybody's listening, you're obviously not alone. You're obviously not alone.
And, I still struggle. I've always been very reliant on natural light. And the last 2 years, I decided that I needed to be able to photograph in any conditions. And so I made it my goal to learn studio lights. And I started with a constant light. But when I moved to strobes, it was I thought, oh yeah, I'm just going to go, I've taken some classes. I'm just going to go out and take these absolutely gorgeous images. And then you're this is not so pretty. I have to practice at this again. Yeah. It's, it's a weird feeling, but it's good. It's good to do that.
Yeah. And it's exciting. Something new is always exciting. That's why I always envy that stage for beginners of everything, every day there's something new that they get to learn. And eventually, as and you start to get to this point to where, it kind of just becomes all about repetition. But then when you find something new, like studio strobes, it's whoa, here's this passion again. It gets so much fun.
I remember when I started photographing people, because that was so different, I found the forum Clickin' Moms. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I would pick a topic that I really wanted to learn about. And because when I was doing jewelry, I wasn't really editing. It was very simple, clean editing. I wasn't putting, I think everyone starts with a lot of filters once they start, a lot of actions and things. So I remember just picking one topic and just looking at every forum post I could find on that subject. And then just spending the week learning about nothing but how to edit in Photoshop, or, and just really get familiar with it. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, I think, to do that. I like research. I like the hunt.
That's a really smart and systematic way about going to learn photography. That's awesome. That's awesome. Switching gears now, I want to go back kind of to now where you are today, right? As a newborn photographer, it always fascinates me to hear other photographers. I want to hear in your own words, what do you think the main goal of a newborn photographer is?
I think the main goal of a newborn photographer is to capture what that baby looks like when they are 2 weeks old or 3 weeks old or 1 week old. Exactly their facial expressions, their stretches, the way they hold their hands, the way that their skin looked, and the way that their family reacts to their arrival. Because it's different for everybody. Some people are natural and some people are really nervous, and you can kind of tell just in meeting them. But I think a lot of newborn photographers get caught up in making the perfect newborn image. I mean, I think a lot of photographers in general get caught up in making the perfect image.
Yeah.
But I think especially with newborns and children, that it's more about making an image that they can look back in 30 years and be like, I remember when you yawned that way and you used to crinkle your nose up. That's my goal, and the way that I approach every newborn session is whatever that child does, if they keep their hands, up in their face, then that's okay with me, because that's beautiful too. It doesn't have to be perfect for it to be compelling and timeless, and be an heirloom for people. So
Yeah.
that's the way I really approach it, is natural.
I'm wondering because I have just like you, I got 2 kids of my own, and we have a 2-year-old. Our daughter's 2,
Uh-huh.
and literally just like within this past month, I've started seeing in her that she's no longer a baby. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's emotional. It's like, oh man, like I miss like when you did this one thing,
Yeah.
or now that it's Christmas, like last year, even though she was 1 year old, like she would hum Jingle Bells.
Yeah.
And now that she's 2, she's like full on singing it,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's sad to think about, or I guess not sad, but it's like, it's very nostalgic. How do you communicate the importance of those missed moments or missed, um, not opportunities, but like how do you communicate that things will be missed, and the importance of photography?
Yeah. So that's a good question, because I think that not everyone gets that.
Yeah,
And they may not get it, like, you may not get it when it's happening, but you get it later, just like the jingle bells, humming jingle bells. I try and convey that to every person that contacts me, that I'm going to photograph their baby the way that they are, not in the vision that maybe another newborn photographer may have. My goal is to capture them, and so I try and show that on my website. I try and talk about it on my website as well, that my goal is to capture those moments, not just the beautiful moments, but the crying faces, or the peeling skin, and those things that we're going to take a perfect image that's perfect for the baby, not perfect, necessarily technically. I'm not exactly a documentary photographer, but I'm kind of a mix between, lifestyle and a little pose, but very gentle. But I really try and be very clear. And to be honest, that means that there are some people that don't come to me because of that. And I'm actually okay with that, because the last thing I want is to do this session that I think is fantastic and have the parent say, well, you didn't, what about, it's not perfect. I wanted this pose, or I wanted something, and I don't want them to be unhappy with their images. So if that's something that they really want, then they go, they can go to somebody else, and that's okay with me.
Yeah. I think a lot of new photographers are going to get a lot out of that statement that you just made, because there is this feeling in the beginning that you have to be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
And as you're proving right now, that's just not the case. You don't have to be the I know I'm gonna. Is it and Getty? No, not
Yeah,
and Getty.
and
And
Getty's,
Getty.
yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously, like what she creates is incredible
Yeah, absolutely.
if that's what you love.
Right.
A lot of
Hmm.
people just want maybe a photographer just in the home or something, and if you specialize in something, it'll pay off. It'll pay off. So, uh, now that we're kind of talking about clients and what clients want, did you find? I want to know how you went about your first paid client, right? Like how did they find you?
Yeah.
How did you book them? Were you nervous, and how did it turn out?
Okay. So I remember the first paid client. And so first I started just portfolio building. I'm from the town that I have my business in. So there's a lot of family and friends that still live around here. So it was fairly easy for me to get started. I know for some people when they maybe are in a different city where they know no one. And I feel like that's a challenge in and of itself to get that started. But so it was easy for me to get started portfolio building. But I remember the first client that found me from just Google search. And I just
Yes.
remember thinking, oh my gosh, I've arrived. This is amazing. Because I mean, you think you make a website and you take good photographs that they're just going to show up. And that's not necessarily the case. And it's really discouraging, because you think, okay, now that they found me, then they're going to book me and this is going to be great. But that doesn't always happen either. It's like, it's a process. But, so it was a family and they actually booked a maternity and a newborn session. And I gave them a fantastic deal. So, I mean,
always in the beginning.
Yeah. But I remember, I did their maternity session at a place that was really far from my house and like I didn't charge extra for it. And then they wanted their newborn session in their home and it was a really dark space and it was a dark rainy day and they wanted to do it when the husband was home from work. So it was late in the afternoon. And I just remember making all these concessions and I just remember thinking, okay, this is a lesson learned. It's time, I'm the expert. It's my job to tell them what I can and can't do. And, am I going to make beautiful images at 5:00 on a Wednesday when it's a cloudy day and we're getting started? We have to go outside to get enough light. It's like I kind of, learned that I need to be a little more assertive. But so of course, everyone makes mistakes and that's awesome because that means you're learning. Because then I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. And then every session after that, I kind of directed things a little bit better. But yeah, that Google search, and then they contacted me and I just thought, wow, this is it. I've made it. And then you think the clients are just going to come in and, it takes a long time. I think it was probably 2.5 years before I finally thought, whew, okay, I'm comfortable. And that was me doing this full time. This is not for someone, someone who's doing another job or, trying to do other things. Then it's not going to be, it could take
overnight.
even longer than that.
Yeah. I'm interested. How did the clients feel about their session? Like when you delivered the photos?
They were happy with them because, like I said, I really bent over backwards to make them. I did the best that I could in those situations, and I can just remember feeling that like cold sweat you get when
of course,
you're not. The outdoor session was fine, but the indoor one, and they, like I said, they were very happy with it. But I knew that I could do better if I had directed things a little bit better. So
now, if they weren't happy with it, if they came back and said like, you know what, actually, these aren't what we were expecting.
Yeah.
What would you do? What would you have done in that case?
I would retake the pictures. I think, it's my responsibility. They don't know that they were my first clients. Of course, I would never have told them that. And it's my responsibility to make sure that they're in the environment that is made for a successful session. So if I didn't make successful images, then that's my responsibility to make it happen. So even if it was not my fault, in terms of like the light was bad or the location wasn't great, it was my responsibility to have directed to make sure that we were in the right location at the right time of day. So if they had come back to me, I would have said, okay, I will be happy to take those again, but we're going to do it on more of my terms,
Right.
and then just make sure that we weren't doing another session again. Now, if it was totally unreasonable, and I think everyone's had unreasonable clients
Of
in
course.
the past. I have refunded people, it doesn't like maybe once I've refunded someone. But you do what it takes to make someone happy, and as much as you possibly can. And there's clients that you're just not a fit with, which is why I try and filter them out at the beginning so that we know ahead of time. There's lots of clients I haven't taken on because I just know it's not going to work out well. But yeah, I would have taken them again or refunded them if they really wanted it, and taken that as a lesson as well.
Right. Yeah. It's a very important lesson. Yes. Very hard lesson. A lot of photographers, myself included, have been in that exact same situation. And I always love hearing from other photographers what they would do, because I remember in the beginning, honestly, probably ego would have gotten in the way, and I would have been like, what? You don't like these photos? Like, these are beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, what do you not see the perfect like grain structure or something like that, And then I would have taken it personally. But now, obviously, coming to the understanding that photography it's not a product. It's 100% a service.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the product isn't technically perfect, the service has to be perfect.
Absolutely.
And giving them that second session is a very small price to pay. So when you delivered that first session, I'm sure that at the time you were like, these photos rock. Like, these are great photos. But looking back, like most of us, we probably look and kind of cringe, right? So now looking back and seeing the work of others, what would you say is the sign of an amateur newborn photographer?
That's a good question. I would say that editing is a really, really big part of that. I think that you can take a good image. It may not be technically perfect, but you can still take a good image. But if you edit it incorrectly or heavy-handedly, then that is probably the most obvious sign of someone. And that's speaking from absolute experience, where my images were very heavy-handed in the beginning.
Trust me, I got plenty of questions about editing later on, so I'm glad to hear that we're about to start on the right track, for sure. Hey, Raymond here. Have you ever noticed that once something is for photographers, it's instantly 10 times more expensive? A white sheet, $10. A white photography backdrop, $100. Doesn't that make you mad? I mean, that's exactly the kind of malarkey that I'm trying to get rid of with our podcast premium membership. Each month, you're going to get an hour of additional podcast interview that is cut from the free version that you are listening to right now. And you will also get monthly photography tutorials guaranteed to take the guesswork out of growing your skills and improving your photography. Now, how much is all of this great monthly photography content, you ask? Well, sure, I could charge $1,000 a month. I could do that, but I'm not. I'm not even going to charge $800 a month, or even $699, the price of a one-day workshop. No. It is all available to you for just $10. That's right. And if you sign up, you will also get some great downloads like all of my Lightroom presets, my wedding contract that you can use, a model release that you can also use any way that you see fit, and my popular ebook, Beyond Photography Basics. That's a $55 value right there, all for just $10. So to become a premium member, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the link on the homepage today. Now let's get back to the rest of today's interview. There seems to be a lot of those when it comes to photography.
Yes.
Those like, has there ever been anything that you thought that like, oh, I have to have this. I absolutely have to have this. And then you got it and you never touched it again?
Yeah. I do that with, I do that a lot with gear, and I'm sure that a lot of photographers do that. I think when I first started, like whenever I first start something, I have this habit of getting really excited about it and buying all the gear. And I like to buy all the best gear because, I mean, if it's going to break in a month, what's the point of, that's wasted money. So I might as well buy something that's pretty good. So, I mean, maybe not the best gear, but so I would say studio lights. I I think it's really important to have good studio lights. However, you don't need 4 studio lights when you've never done it before, which is exactly what I went out and did and bought 4 really expensive, and then all the modifiers before you even know. And right now I use 2, and it's like, it wasn't a waste of money, but it was definitely, I could have saved that money a little bit and waited till I need it. I think like it's important. And one thing I am trying to do is, as I grow, is to grow out of something, so buy one light, learn how to use it, learn what you can do with it before you go out and buy the next one or the next one, and then that way you kind of know. It's the same thing with cameras. You don't need to buy the best camera. Just learn the one you have until you know everything, until you know the limitations of that camera, and then you buy the next one, because otherwise, you're not, it's not a waste of money, but it's kind of is if you don't know what you're doing. But
yeah,
but yeah, lots of stuff. I do that at probably, little things all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's easy with the little things. And
I would
I'm
say
glad
one
to hear.
thing, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One thing is I don't buy a lot of actions, but I would say 2 or 3 times a year, I'll buy actions, and I always use them. And I think, oh, this is nice. And then I immediately go back to what I was doing before, my own style. Yeah. So I think once you have something that you love and speaks to you, it's okay to, I guess, buy those things, but with the idea that, don't, not that actions are bad. I think actions are great for helping you figure out your style. But you don't need to buy every action. It's not going to make you a better photographer. It's not going to make you a better editor. You only do so much. So, I would say that's probably the one thing that I've done the most of, where every time I buy it, I try it on 3 pictures and I'm like, what am I doing this again for?
That's hilarious. That's definitely going to be one of the memorable quotes from this episode for sure, is that actions aren't going to change your photography.
No.
So I think I want to know, like, talking there about gear, we talked about the gear that we don't need.
Yeah.
Now I want to know, if you had to do, how much gear do you actually need to get started photographing newborns? And obviously, I know that safety here is an important issue. Is there anything also that's not photography related that you would suggest investing in?
Yeah. So I would say that in the beginning, a good in-person newborn workshop is kind of invaluable, even if it's not, like I remember when I first started, I took a newborn class from a newborn photographer who was very well established, and beautiful work, absolutely gorgeous work. But I knew from the beginning, I knew when I booked the workshop that her style was not what I wanted to do, what did not speak to me. But I wanted to learn the finer points of working with babies, how she soothed them, those kinds of things that it's hard. You certainly don't want to make a mistake on a newborn that comes to you. You want to be pretty comfortable around them to start with. So that was really important to kind of, I think, like one good in-person workshop. And I say in-person because I know a lot of them are online now, and that's fine. But I think that there's something to be said for just seeing somebody in person and really, getting around a baby that, they don't always sleep right away. They don't always settle down. Some of them, startle really easily, and figuring out how to work with those little issues so you don't freak out the first time it happens to you is really, really important. I don't think you need much gear. I pretty much shoot my entire newborn sessions with I have a Nikon D850, which I love that camera, but you don't need, there's lots that it does that I don't need for a newborn session. I would say a prime lens is really nice. I personally I have a Sigma 35 millimeter, one of the art series that I have used since I started, that I still use at every single newborn session. And if I want to get, it allows you to focus really close. So it doesn't take macro images. I do use a macro lens, but before I had one, I could get up really close on baby and it would almost simulate a macro lens on it as well. So I didn't have to buy, a whole bunch of lenses, and I just sort of bought them as I could afford them. But yeah, I would say a, a prime lens, or if you're a zoom person, that's okay. I would say the 24-70 is probably a good lens. I've personally never shot newborns with it, but I know that some newborn photographers do, and it's nice to have the versatility of zoom in and zoom out kind of.
Yeah. What do you think about like lighting? Do you think that newborn photographers need to go all in with flash work, or
No.
is natural light more than enough?
Yeah, I think natural light's more than enough, especially when you're just working with one baby on a beanbag. You don't need, you're not stopping down to 3.5, and so you could be at 2.8 or even 1.8 if you like that look. So it's okay to not have a ton of light. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
you don't. You're not lighting 10 people in a group, and you need to have everyone in focus. You just need the eyes in focus on a baby. And so, yeah, I think a window, but I would say that you want to make sure the light is filtered. So you don't want a window that has direct light. You want a window that has nice, soft light. So I would avoid west facing if you're shooting in the afternoon, because you have that sun coming in, and east facing in the morning. So the best light is always on the north and the south.
Gotcha.
And
good tips.
Yeah, a little bit of, I use like a sheer fabric, and if I was going to someone's home, I would just use painter's tape and tape it up around the window, or even clip it if they had
smart.
If they had like a curtain, then I
Curtain
could
rod.
clip it down. Yeah, and that would allow me to get enough light. Filter the light enough. You don't want really harsh shadows. Harsh lights on baby's face. You do want some shadowing. So generally I'm placing baby like parallel to the window, but yeah, I don't think you need a lot. I personally don't use strobes on newborns. I've kind of thought about it because I feel like the light is very clean, and it's so much easier to control, but I don't know that I love flashing with a newborn yet. I haven't quite gotten that. Lots of people do it. I just haven't gotten comfortable with that yet. So
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And we've talked about your skill, right? Everything that you've learned over the years. If you had to start over again today, right? Like today, your husband's like, "Hey, you know what? I hate this job. I don't want to do it anymore." And you said, "I want to start a photography business." Is there something that you would do differently today to get to where you are faster?
I would say that if you know who you are and what you want, to not fuss around with doing any other kind of photography. I think it's okay to you want to test things a little bit, but I think I was pretty good at this, but I think I could have done better at just, I'm only going to do newborns and maternity and young families, and don't mess around with the extended families, or the reunions, or I've never shot a wedding, and I never will. That takes a very special kind of person, and I am not that kind of person. I don't handle stress well.
Stress, there's cake. Every day you show up, there's cake.
That
What's
would be
stressful
nice.
about that?
I wish that cake would be nice, but yeah, I'm not good at that. I wasn't even good at my own wedding when I had it, let alone photographing it.
That's hilarious. So
So
figure out what it is that you love, and then just don't
do
waver.
it. Yeah, don't fuss around with anything else, because the sooner that you make a niche for yourself, the sooner you're going to attract the kind of clients that you want. And if you're not showing people that niche, or you're showing things that you don't love, then it's going to take longer to get to that point. So
Of course.
the sooner you can decide what you want, and it's not to say it can't change, it's just that, you need to know what you want. So
Yeah. Is there any rules or information that you hear being taught to new photographers that you think is just like bad information?
ooh. I would say that I have seen some things about whether you're all inclusive or if you sell prints and products afterwards, that sometimes it makes me cringe a little bit. I think that as long as you're a sustainable business, I don't care if you're, as long as you're pricing yourself so that you don't go out of business in a year, that I don't care what you do, that I think that sometimes it bothers me the way that I personally am a session fee, and then they purchase products and their digital files and whatever afterwards. And I love that. I don't want to be all inclusive, but I think sometimes the way that those two groups fight, it's not necessarily something that they're teaching wrong, but the people that believe you should only sell products believe that the people that aren't selling products are the worst, and the people that aren't selling products think that the people that are selling products are the worst. And it's just like, as long as you have a sustainable business, like, I don't care, just price yourself so that you can stay in business. And that's all that matters. So I would say that that's like the one thing that maybe bothers me, is that there's such conflict between the two, and everyone thinks that they're the right one. So
that's great. That's great advice. And obviously, I mean, that's why there's, what do they say? That's why there's Ford, Dodge, and Chevy. Like, it doesn't, that you can make your own decision if you want to. I love it. Well, Alison, is there anything that I didn't ask you about today that you want to make sure that the listener knows before we wrap this up?
I think just maybe one thing, not that you didn't ask me, but that I just would love to say, is that there's still times when I'm nervous and stressed and like in a session, but you'll never know it. And I think that it's as a beginning photographer, I wish that I had known that every photographer goes through moments when they don't know what they're going to do, and they are not sure how to proceed, and they're just flying by the seat of their pants. Like, there's no photographer out there that does not have a moment where they're like, oh crap.
I don't know what to do here.
Yeah. And I think as when I was beginning, I didn't realize that even those best photographers, they're flying by the seat of their pants a little bit too. So there's, you just figure it out. I think that the only way to figure it out is to just go with it,
just to do it. Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like
that's great.
That's something that I just wish I had realized sooner, that you're never going to be completely comfortable.
I still show up before. This. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I still show up before every single wedding, and I always show up early, and I will just sit there in my car for like 10 minutes, and I just have the worst butterflies. And it's like, well, what if there's like no windows inside? What if there's no this? What if this goes wrong?
Yeah.
What if, the mother of the bride is like not a nice person? And I just always put myself through these, stupid exercises that mean nothing.
Right.
And, as I'm sure you can attest to, as time goes on, it gets less and less, but there's still something there. Yeah. And I want to thank you for sharing that. That's going to be a really powerful moment for a lot of listeners today to pick up on that.
Okay.
Before I let you go, Alison, can you please tell the listeners where they can find you online?
Okay. Well, I am Alison Winterroth on Instagram, and my last name has double R's, so it's Winterroth. And I am on Facebook, but I'm not too active on it. So really, if you wanted to find me, Instagram's a great place, or my website, which is AlisonWinterroth.com.
Perfect. Alison, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I had a blast talking to you, and I'm excited to keep up with you and all of your new adventures, and hopefully a tornado doesn't take you away today.
So far, so good. Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Hey, do me a favor right now. If you're listening, swipe up in whatever podcast player you're listening to, or just click on the show notes, and then there will be a link for you to go to the website to see the show notes and just check out some examples of Alison's newborn and maternity work. It's beautiful, and it's something that I think you could look at and really appreciate. You can see that it's timeless. It's not something that is going to fall out of style in the future. It's something that it's photography that I know is going to stand the test of time, and she just is a really good example of that. And when it comes to newborn photography, that can be hard. So swipe up, click the link, head over to the show notes, and you can see some examples of Alison's work. Alison, if you're listening right now, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, especially in the middle of, a potential hurricane. That is just insane to me. And your dedication is there. And again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did. I really enjoyed our chat, and I know that the listeners did as well. So right now, I just want to take a quick second to read a iTunes review this week. iTunes reviews are something that really help the podcast, and I truly appreciate them. So this week's iTunes review comes from Monty2431. And Monty says, since I was in high school, I wanted to be a photographer, but everyone around me told me that I needed a real job. So for the past 40 years, I have been doing something that I have not enjoyed. After watching many hours of your podcast in the last few days, I'm assuming on YouTube, I have decided to get into photography one way or the other. Thanks for the great podcast. Monty, wow, I can tell you right now that review is going to resonate with a lot of people because I was there. I heard plenty of people tell me that either cinematography and photography was, not a real job and that I should do something that was more quote unquote stable. And I'm so glad that you put in that time and you realize that it was not what you wanted. It was not making you happy. And now you are pursuing something that is making you happy through photography. And I am elated that this podcast is helping you. I don't know if it helped you realize that, but that it's helping you, that it's helping push you in the direction that you want to go, that is going to make you happy. So again, Monty, thank you so much for that 5-star review. That really does mean a whole lot to me. And if you're listening, the price of this podcast is absolutely free. If you're listening on iTunes right now, you listen to this absolutely free. And I'm so grateful for each and every review that we get here on the podcast. And if you haven't left a review, I just want to ask if you would consider it. Again, it really helps out the podcast. And that's it. That's all that I can say. So thank you so much for everybody who does leave a review in iTunes or whatever podcast player you're listening to. So that is it for this week. Join me again next week when we tackle the ever-changing world of SEO and blogging, and specifically why blogging doesn't have to be so hard, and the mistakes that a lot of new photographers make when it comes to blogging. So until then, get out there, keep shooting, stay safe, focus on yourself, and that's it. All right. I'll see you next time. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.